What's up, everybody? We're back with another $2 deck tech for 2DH format we created to have a new meta for Commander and to make the game more accessible to new players and players on a budget. This is my Witch-Maw Nephilim deck. We allow the Nephilim in our format to have a little bit more variety, and it's a pretty overpowered card, which, you know, what I like to do is take a really strong general and then make a really stupid deck around it, just so that the deck still has a little bit of competitiveness to it, even though it's probably bad and built wrong. So the theme for this deck is 1/1 counters and Infect and Proliferate. So we'll have a little bit of fun with that. The nice thing about having green in your multicolor deck is you can have a really good mana base, make it base green, and just have all the stuff you need to get going. I'm also going to show you some Infect and Proliferate cards. We've got a lot of creatures that can give you utility with your +1/+1 counters and come into play with them, etc. And we've got some payoff cards like Corpse Jack Menace, which can make the deck explosive and powerful. This general is good on its own because whenever you cast a spell, you get to add counters to it. So it just becomes a threat over time, and it's going to give itself trample. So you can either kill people with commander damage or give it Infect and kill them pretty early. A couple of cards that are super cute in decks like this. We've got Ordeal of Thassa, 2 mana. You're going to draw 2 cards when you attack. And Ordeal of Nylea, 2 mana, you're going to get 2 lands when you attack, both of which are great on my general and most of the other creatures that enter with 1/1 counters. We've also got Bread for the Hunt to give the deck a little bit of reach with all of the bad creatures that I will be playing. So first off, I'll go through the quick ramp package here. You've got a couple of off-color green cards to fix your mana early. Tri-Belter, Explorer, Rampant Growth, Kodamas, some basic stuff that you'd expect. I do have a couple signets in there to fix some of my main color needs, and Fellwar Stone is great in any 4 or 5 color deck. I included a little bit of card draw with Urban Evolution and Painful Truths to keep the wheels greased, and you've got some really nice lands here that tap for 4 colors, Exotic Orchard, Grand Coliseum, Command Tower, you know, the ones that fetch any color, and then some tri-lands. I've also run the Scrylands in this deck and the Vivids in this deck. So here is the Infect and Proliferate package. One thing I want to mention about Tainted Strike, which is pretty fun, is you can cast it at instant speed, so you can give your opponent's creatures Infect. And one of the goals of this deck is to potentially just get all of your opponent's Infect counters so that you can win with the late game Proliferate mana sink plans. So Phyresis is another way to give a creature Infect. Grafted Exoskeleton, great on your general, great on anything with evasion. Blighted Agent to just kind of start giving each opponent poison counters. Corrupted Conscience, it's always nice to have a control magic effect in your deck. This one is on theme with the Infect. Triumph of the Hordes makes all your little guys that I'll show you are in the deck lethal as a group. And Phyrexian Hydra, just a 2-turn clock if your opponent doesn't have a blocker or you have evasion. Phyrexian Swarmlord is one of the payoff cards in this deck. It can win the game on its own. Again, your goal is to get some Infect counters early on your opponents so that cards like this pay off later. And Ikarat's probably the most efficient way to give everyone an Infect counter, which is why he is in the deck. So we're going to proliferate away in the late game with cards like Viral Drake and Thrumming Bird. This is one of the key cards in the deck. It's good early to get your little guys going, and it's great late when the Infect counters have already landed. Oh, one thing to note about Viral Drake too, you can do it more than once a turn, so because you don't have to tap it or anything, you can just sink mana into this in the late game and finish people off. So it quickly can become a race if you end up drawing the Infect plan. Grim Affliction is one of the only removal spells in the deck. It's pretty slow, pretty bad, but it has Proliferate on it, so we threw it in there. It's just good enough to make it. Gambit's an auto-include in a deck like this. It's just Divination with Proliferate. Contagion Clasp, another kind of bad, kind of slow card, but you know, having the option to proliferate in the late game, you can just race somebody out. Here's one of the great payoff cards of the deck. Inexorable Tide triggers whenever you cast a spell. So, you know, when this is out with your general, you're adding 2 counters, and then you're proliferating to add another counter, and you can make your general really big, really fast, And Astral Cornucopia is one of those cards where you only include in a deck like this because of the Proliferate. Otherwise, this card's pretty bad, but it's really solid. If you get one of these engines going, it just becomes more and more mana each turn. So some cute stuff, some silly stuff. Here's the creatures that are kind of the dorks of the deck that enter play with 1/1 counters. Frogling's great because he can protect your general if it happens that your general becomes a threat, and he also has a graft to help some of the other cards that want 1/1 counters but don't come and play with them. Raptor and Experiment 1 are just early cards to get you going early, make cards like Bread for the Hunt actually worth running. Phantom Nantuko, he's pretty reasonable. He can chump block in the early game and get bigger by tapping. He also has Trample, so cards like Grafted Exoskeleton on him are pretty reasonable. You've got Fertilid, which can become 2 mana to get a land or 4 mana to get 2 lands each turn if you have any kind of Proliferate going or you're doubling counters when it enters play. Coatl just gets bigger over time. Mana Gorger Hydra and Forgotten Ancient kind of do the same thing. They get bigger over time. This one has Trample. This one has, give the counters away to your creatures that want them more. Etched Oracle, not the best card ever. It's 5 mana draw 4 is pretty reasonable. But if you have any kind of doubling effects or Proliferate going on, you could potentially draw more cards with this guy or use him as a threat if you need to. Fathom Mage, one of the better cards in the deck. It just draws you cards. I mean, it just gets going. And if you have any synergies going whatsoever, you're drawing multiple cards instead of one card. It's pretty solid little engine. Cytoplast Rootkin, another graft card to help move things over. For example, if Fathom Mage enters play after Rootkin, you can graft 4 and you're going to draw a card for each 1/1 counter. So it's pretty solid little interactions and synergies. You can kind of see what I'm doing here once you see the whole package. Alter Ego, I mean, it's not the best card, but it's pretty funny that you can potentially sink mana into it and have something enter with 1/1 counters that wants them. It's also reasonable because it can't be countered. Same thing with Mist Cutter Hydra, can't be countered and can help you versus the mono blue decks or the control decks. Prime Speaker Zagana, this card's great in almost every blue-green deck. It's especially good in this deck. You just get these big chunks of card draw in this deck. And then Genesis Hydra, another kind of mana sink late game to get you back in the game if your board's been wrathed or whatever's going on. And it's great. It comes in play with 1/1 counters, and that's what we want. All right, here's some more of the payoff cards or cards that can enhance some of these duders over here or your general. So Menace and Hardened Scales are just going to make things get out of hand quickly as far as their size. Varel can double counters at instant speed on a permanent to just make it hard for your opponents to figure out what to block and what's going on. Just kind of a cool card for this deck. Citadel Siege adds 1/1 counters at the beginning of combat, can make kind of anything a threat over time or help you get counters on creatures that want them. Collective Effort, this is a new card for the deck. It's nice because it's got a little utility with, it can be a removal spell, it can destroy an enchantment, and it can add 1/1 counters to all of your creatures. Savagery can just be explosive and make something a threat, like your Blighted Agent early, or just suddenly your general is, lethal commander damage. And it's a nice little card advantage spell too with the flashback. So if it gets countered, you can use it in the late game or whatever's going on. A 7 mana is not too unreasonable to add 10 1/1 counters to something once you've seen kind of the creatures that I run here. This can easily go on like a Viral Drake or something. This card I can't actually tell you about. You just have to read it, see how good it is. Verdant Confluence gets permanents from your graveyard back to your hand. So again, this is kind of a backup plan card usually. If you get it in the early game though, and you just want to get 3 lands into play for whatever reason, it's great for that. If you're kind of waiting to commit things to the board until the game stalls out a little bit, or you can just suit up some of your creatures that want 1/1 counters and go to town. So a nice versatile card. Give Take, it's pretty reasonable in this deck. A lot of times Take is just going to draw you a chunk of cards, and that's really what this deck relies upon, is just occasionally drawing 7 or 10 to refill your hand. So pretty reasonable card for this deck. Zamet Guildmage, a little bit slow. It's almost more of a backup plan card, but 2 mana draw 1 when you have a ton of 1/1 counters going on, but maybe you don't have your evasion or you don't have your infect or some way to get through. So this card's fine in the deck. Shine Wind, though, I'm proud of this one. This is some tech right here. So obviously it's not that good if it only has one 1/1 counter on it. It's like 4 mana destroy an enchantment. But if you can get this thing going, you can just wipe the board of enchantments over time. It's pretty funny. And I mean, it has evasion. It can have some kind of utility later in the game as well. But I really like this tech. I think it's pretty funny. Speaking of evasion, we've got Abzan Falconer. It's a really nice surprise when your threats are 1/1 counter based, like your general. Your opponents might think they've got blockers or, you know, you're not super threatening, but once you've got that flying across the board, it's kind of scary. Champion Alamble, same story. This deck doesn't run a ton of creatures, but really, you know, with the Proliferate or the Increasing Savagery or the different ways to put counters on creatures, this can make your whole team unblockable really quickly, which is exactly what you want in a deck like this. It's running Infect strategies and Bread for the Hun and things like that. And Elite Scaleguard is one of the best cards in this deck. It just seems so subtle, but if you got 3 creatures with 1/1 counters, you just tap down your opponent's creatures and swing through and take them out. So nice little enabler with the bolster and a great form of evasion. Love this card. All right, we got to protect the board. We're playing creature-based decks. So Inspiring Call is going to not only draw you a card for all your 1/1 counter creatures, it's also going to make them indestructible. So it's an excellent answer to a board wipe if you can hold it up. And then I also run just a couple of counter spells in this deck to make sure my opponents aren't just wrathing at will or stealing my creatures or exiling all my enchantments or whatever. So Negate, Swansong, and Stubborn Denial are all very efficiently costed, and they're designed to stop the board wipes that try to reset you. All right, so that's my Witch-Maw deck. It's not the most casual deck because we are playing Infect and things like that, but it's more of a theme deck. It's lower powered than some of the other decks that I build, and I think it's fairly friendly. Super fun deck. This is just one of the things you can kind of do with 2DH is build a slower deck that kind of does a thing and Johnny out and have fun, explore magic, do things you wouldn't otherwise do. The full deck list can be found in the links below, as well as our Facebook group, and I'm also working on a website, but I am a brand new developer, so it's going to be improving over time. It's called $2magic.com, the number 2. Check it out. Thanks for watching, guys.